I am going to call the meeting to order. Pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Thank you. Approval of the agenda?
I move the agenda.
So move. Second?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous decision. Motion passes. I can't see. Approval of minutes?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Unanimous vote. It passes. And let's move right on to open forum if there is any. None? Seeing none, we are going to move on to presentations. And so we're going to start right away with the construction updates with Ryan, I guess. Lucky.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So as I like to every year in the summer, give an update on a lot of our current construction projects, let you know how they're going in town, but also touch on some of our big ones that we have upcoming and kind of the progress that we're making on those. So I'll kind of talk about a lot of road projects first, then I'll move into our water treatment plant projects towards the end. First one I want to talk about is East Point Douglas and Jamaica Avenue. This was our big 2-year project. I've got 2 screens here kind of showing all the areas of work. Obviously, the main Jamaica Avenue and East Point Douglas intersection we completed last year. You can see the roundabout kind of in pink. That was our first phase we started this year. That went really well, even with all the rain. We were able to get that done actually a little bit early and got that open before the 4th of July. And then they moved into phase 4, as we call it. That's that area behind Target where, due to the road conditions and how old it was, it needed to be a total reconstruct. And the challenge with that is the corridor is narrow enough. There was just no way to legally have 2 lanes of traffic with the construction going on. So you notice we had that one-way traffic flow, which was better than it was when the roundabout was being worked on, but still a little confusing. They're actually wrapping up the first phase of that one-way traffic, and then towards the end of this month, they'll be switching to the second phase and building the other half of East Point Douglas Road. And at the same time, they're going to be working on a mill and overlay of East Point Douglas Road in the blue. That section is just not as old. The curb's in a lot better shape overall. So we can do a mill and overlay kind of in front of, Menards and down to the townhomes there. So that'll wrap up sometime in September, and then the project will be complete. So we're all very excited for that.
Hey, Ryan, real quick, I noticed too, they took all our lights down along there. Are they replacing them with new ones then?
They are, yes. That's a good question, Commissioner. We're upgrading them to kind of that new standard we have of overhead. I call it kind of a Cobra head style, but a little more decorative style light that you see around the East Point and Jamaica intersection. They actually match what's on 80th Street between Keats and Jamaica. Moving on, we've got our South District Street and Utility project. So that's the area highlighted in blue is the actual project that's happening this year. You can see other roads that are labeled 100th Street, Ideal Avenue. Those were done the previous 2 years, and 105th Street as well as a new road. You can see towards the bottom of the screen. That was also complete 2 years ago. With the South District Street and Utility improvements, the main kind of X, we call it, where 103rd, Hadley, and 100th all realign. That's following that county southwest arterial study that I've maybe talked about some in the past, where 100th Street is a city street right now, but long-term that's going to be turned over to the county because they don't have any county roads in the southern part of Cottage Grove, and they want to have a county road that serves this area, meets all the county kind of higher volume standards and such as this area develops. That'll also provide access down to Gray Cloud Island, which is obviously future guided county regional parks. So doing this kind of big X and realignment it's tough. There's a lot of road closures with it, but it's really important from a traffic flow standpoint. All the right angles and stop signs are not conducive to a county road. So, kind of a challenge this summer right now for existence. For example, Hadley's closed north of 100th Street. And then in the next couple of weeks, they have to make that tie-in of the new 100th to the old 100th. So actually that'll be closed with a detour down on 105th. So just a lot of detours, a lot of challenges, but we appreciate everyone kind of living through it this summer as we do the best we can. And with some of these closures, it just lets the work be done so much faster. We looked at trying to do more bypass lanes, and you spend a lot of money on those, and it can drag the project out almost longer than a full construction season. So we felt some of these detours and closures were the better way to do that project. So there's also a lot of development happening down here. This is where the North Point development is, new development called Graymont Village, kind of right around that X where it says proposed 100th Street. That's where a new apartment called Norhart was approved. So a lot of new development that'll use these new roadways. Another smaller one that is a good safety improvement, I would say, down at River Oaks that I think I touched on briefly last year, and this will start construction very soon, is the restricted crossing U-turn intersection improvements. It's a city-led project, mostly funded by MnDOT though, actually, through several grants and such that we're able to get from them. To orient yourself, on the north side is actually River Oaks, and the bottom right is Zivic's Garden Center. So right now you've got that median that has the full access, and this is, some people call it a J-turn. You see a lot on Highway 52. This is a lot more compact. Sometimes on Highway 52, those U-turns are pretty far removed, a quarter mile or more. These are, fairly close to the current intersection. And what it does is it prevents that just full cross-through movement. But you still have the U-turns on either end, so people can make the motions they need to make to go north or south. It doesn't, necessarily increase, the capacity, right? It doesn't make gaps for folks on the 61, but it eliminates those right angle movements and right angle crashes, which are by far the most severe type of crashes that can have at these high speeds. So it really removes those, and yes, you're pulling out into traffic, but you're going with traffic then, right? So if someone were to make an error in that judgment, right, it's more of a rear end style crash if there is an accident. So much less severe, pretty much across the board. And it really can help, in some ways improve flow getting out, because, if you leave River Oaks after a big event, everyone wants to wait to take a left, so it just backs up. Now you can't take a left. So really people are forced just to take that right and then make the U-turn. So you can actually see that traffic start to flow a little better as well. So that's a major improvement as well.
Ryan, that exit coming out of the golf course there,
Yep.
are you gonna have curbing put in just to separate the inbound and outbound and kind of coax them to the right?
So I think, good question, Commissioner, it was more of a just striping.
Okay.
But with that, where I put the X on there, that's where that median's being filled in, so it'll actually be continuous, just grass median. So I think that's what they're looking at, is more that type of situation, so.
Sweet, yeah, this is a game changer for that intersection.
Yep. No, it was really good. We were happy that MnDOT was supportive. We were able to get the grant, and actually the project, just due to different things out of our control, was going to be more expensive, and they actually awarded an additional $300,000. So there's about $1 million in grant funding for this project. So
Fantastic.
very excited about that. Kind of a smaller one, but still always important, is our 2024 pavement management. This is our neighborhood reconstructs that we like to do every year. This is in the Prestige Estates neighborhood, north side of 80th, between Jamaica and Keats, kind of right in the middle there. So total reconstruct, new curb, new pavement, moving along pretty well. The curb is complete, and half the paving was done, and they were doing additional paving here today. So looking to wrap that up probably sometime early August, I would say. So moving pretty well. And before I talk about County 1900th, I'll just mention Jamaica. It's just a mill and overlay, not a great figure to show, but we have our Jamaica Avenue mill overlay happening. Traffic's been flipped to the other side, and if everything goes well with weather, hoping to have that complete, end of July into early August as well. So that'll be a nice improvement in that condition. The rutting was very bad on that roadway, to the point where we had a hard time even plowing it in the winter because of the snow that got left behind in those ruts. So very happy to have that project done. Right in front of us, we've got County 19 and 100th Street realignment. This is that major project we're working on with the county. It's about $47 million project. To date, we've received $14 million in grant funds for it, and we have requests in for an additional about 21, 22 through the federal government, and then there's about 11 million between the county and city CIP. So we're really looking for that final 21, 22 million in grant funding to round out this project. Could start construction in 2026. There's probably some that we want to do and money we'd like to expend that year into 2027, and wrapping up potentially in 2028. So it is a 2-year plus project. It's very large, and this is that whole realignment of 100th Street to go directly from the Jamaica Avenue and 100th intersection right over to the interchange of Highway 61 and County 19 in that direction. So everything in purple, just if you're wondering what that color is there, that's 3M land that we're working with them on that, they could, either develop themselves or actually sell for development with the construction of these roadways. So that's what the purple areas are highlighted. And with this, we'd realign kind of slightly Miller Road and County 19. And then we'd also, on the top there, that road coming in is an extension of the West Point Douglas frontage road. So that comes out of the Jamaica roundabout right now, kind of dead ends by Public Works. So that would actually continue down to 100th Street. And just real quickly, I want to just show, we actually created an animation. So we're able to take the county's design profile and actually create an animation that shows what the roadway is going to look like. So it kind of shows the project area, and we kind of fly into the western extent of the project. So we're at the Jamaica Avenue intersection, and you can see the old 100th Street alignment. Here's the new alignment looking east with the new bridge off in the distance. So really this is looking to support new development and existing businesses in the area both, right? Because the Jamaica Avenue interchange has a lot of challenges, opens up over 500 acres of new land in the immediate area for development with good access to the highway. This is part of the Mississippi River Regional Trail or Mississippi River Trail Corridor, so we'll have new, obviously separated trails along this new roadway. And then here's the new road section as you go east. You can see where Miller Road ties in here. That'll continue to go down to 3M. But the biggest part of the project is this bridge over the railroad tracks, which also crosses a major gas line and the Met Council sewer that serves the whole East Metro. So big bridge, just the construction alone is $10 million. So that's a huge safety improvement for this area to have that crossing. Be a new intersection with Innovation Road, and then we end at a roundabout at the interchange. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. It's a huge project. Always going for new grants. It's a big undertaking. So
That animation was very nice.
yeah, and what's really cool is with the actual profile, the CAD profiles and Google Earth imagery, it's so slick we didn't have to fly a drone through anything. It's quite, for what you get, it's very simple to create. So it's amazing what you can do with technology, and it helps show a lot more what we're doing. As much as an engineer, I love this little layout on the screen here. That really gives life to the project.
Yeah.
So.
I was actually getting ready to pull up Google Maps to figure out where that was, so that was key.
Yeah, we also did that because even with the grants, we're submitting for these grants with the federal government. We actually submit this profile of that animation as well, so it can help them see what we're trying to accomplish.
Wow.
So switching gears real quick as I wrap up, talk about some of our water projects, and a lot going on this picture here. But really, all I want to highlight is we have a whole bunch of interim treatment plants, right, that continue to provide city with water that meets all of the health-based values, all of the new EPA values that came out this year. So we have 2 additional ones. You can see some pictures on the side. Those kind of metal buildings, those are 2 additional ones that we've recently constructed that I'll have some more information on. But also those 2 red boxes, the one that's kind of in the southern part of the screen that says LZWTP. So that's our low zone water treatment plant. That's a permanent treatment plant that's under construction right now. We'll complete next year. And there's another one up by the Central Fire Station that I'll talk about. That's our second permanent treatment plant. But also down by that low zone treatment plant, which is right by the intersection of 110th Street and Ideal, we have a new office building for part of our public works staff being constructed next to it. So first with those 2 new, we call them the interim treatment plants, right? They're continuing to serve our city with fully treated water, just in a much more cost-effective structure. The actual treatment on the inside matches exactly what we would do in a permanent facility. And we're actually going to move these vessels into our permanent treatment plants so we're not wasting them. And it's all funded for by the state and through 3M, right? But we want to be very good with those dollars, right? That's still public money that we need to be very cost conscious of. So these are at our well 9 and well 11 wells, and they just actually became operational here in May. Well 9 is, if you've gone to the archery range behind the fire station, there's that little road that snakes down. It's right along that road. And then well 11 is right across the parking lot from the splash pad. So if you see that metal building, that's what that is. And this is a new technology for Minnesota of ion exchange. So it's the first time ion exchange has been used for PFAS treatment in the state of Minnesota. We actually did a pilot study, a big pilot study 3 years ago funded by the 3M settlement to prove this technology out. So this building is about half the cost of if we would have had to have done a GAC treatment plant like we had been doing in this temporary scale. So very excited to have that up and running, and it's working very well for our city. That low zone treatment plant, that's the first of our permanent treatment plants. You can see some construction photos here from over the winter. There's obviously no snow over the winter, so we were able to keep building it right through that season, so that worked out well. The bottom image is just a rendering of what it's going to look like when it's complete, and that'll be operational in May of 2025, so a little less than a year from now. And right next to it is that new office building. So this is for our utility and engineering divisions of Public Works. This has been in the works separately for a while because we are completely out of space at our facility, and this was the most practical way to relocate some of the divisions because it'll be right by that treatment plant, so it'll work really well with the utility division. And the engineering division just works a lot with them, so that was another easier division to move that actually offices out of City Hall, and that freed up space at City Hall. So on the bottom is a rendering, and on the top is a picture I took last week, so kind of that same view and how it's coming together. So very excited to get that building open and operational over the winter. And then in the future, we would move all of Public Works and Parks there. This was built to expand to accommodate the whole department, over time. And lastly, that intermediate zone treatment plant. So this is our second of 2 permanent treatment plants that'll serve our community. It's going to go right behind the central fire station, kind of north of those water towers. So this is going to be a very similar facility to what is being built down by 110th Street, just larger because it is about 2.5 times the capacity for treatment. And this will serve everything kind of north and east of Highway 61. Doing our final design right now. We just got all the grant funding from the state to do that, and we look to start construction next spring, and that'll be a full 2-year build. So it'd be spring of 2027 that would actually be completed. And here's just a rendering of what that one will look like. Obviously, it's more in a residential area. We're trying to, within reason, have it pretty decently aesthetically pleasing, and we're really mimicking the fire station architecture is what we're trying to do with this facility. It's obviously a big building, going into an area with homes. We're very aware of that, so we're trying to really focus the design to minimize that impact. Anything with semis not having to back up, right, that we have drive-through for everything, and really any type of deliveries being on the far east side of the building away from the home. So really on a day-to-day, there's maybe 1 or 2 Public Works pickups that come and go, and like those semis for change-outs of the treatment media. This will be an ion exchange treatment plant, kind of like our new temporary ones. That's like once every 6 years they come. So it'll be a larger building, but it's going to be very, quiet and hopefully a good neighbor for those homes there. So with that, it's the last of my updates for you. Any questions before I pass along to the next item? All right.
Seeing no questions,
Sounds good.
we will move on to the next presentation, which is going to be the 2024 Annual Use of Force presentation.
Evening, Commissioners, staff. Thank you for giving me the time to talk about last year's annual use of force report. As you know, we've been doing this for a handful of years. I think this is the 4th year that we've done this. Typically, this happens in the winter, spring season, but we postponed this presentation so that we could tackle the police and fire department strategic plans because those were more pressing issues. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about last year's use of force. So I'm not going to paraphrase everything from the chief's message, but I do want to emphasize our department's profound commitment for community safety, progressive policies and tactics, innovative training, and state the fact that we are well ahead of the reform curve. We've been there for a number of years. Typically things that you're seeing in the media and from politicians about changes and reforms to police policies, practices, we've done 5 to 10 years ago, and that's been a consistent theme in Cottage Grove for at least a decade now. So things like crisis intervention training, de-escalation, bars on certain tactics, we did that years and years ago, so well ahead of the reform curve on those things. As you know, things are changing very rapidly in law enforcement, and so we're striving to be a very agile, adaptive, resilient agency and be very innovative and ever-changing in the way we train and coach and train our officers. And it's all about being accountable to the community and emphasizing safety for all community members and our officers as well. So I won't go over mission statement and vision. As you know, these are brand new to our department with our new strategic plan. And I just want to emphasize the fact that our use of force program and this report and doing things like what we're doing tonight, having these forums with the community members fits very well into our strategic plan. It's very important for us to have these listening sessions, excuse me, and educate and listen to the public and adapt to what the public wants from us. So we feel like we have a very good recipe for success when it comes to our tactics and training and our use of force program. And what we're doing here tonight is a very important piece of that puzzle, right? As I've mentioned to the commission before, we're looking at the commission to be our citizen advisory panel. We want to bring things to you, bring information to you, bring ideas to you, and you be that sounding board from the community back to us and tell us whether this is a good idea or not. And so tonight I'm bringing to you statistics and information about our use of force from last year, and really I'm hopeful that you can give me some of your thoughts and guidance. Just for those who don't know, and the listening audience, when there is a use of force incident, our officers are required to report that through a series of mechanisms. The sergeant will also respond to the scene and do an investigation. When that call is completed, the officers go through a reporting sequence where they report all the information that's will then feed into our use of force database. The sergeant does a QA on that, and then all that information along with things like reports and squad video and the whole package then goes to a use of force review committee, and every single use of force that happens in Cottage Grove is reviewed by this committee on a quarterly basis. And so during that review, we're doing things like deciding whether the use of force is reasonable within policy, whether there's any equipment or training or policy issues, and we're looking at every single use of force with a lens of, was this preventable? Could we do this better? Would a different piece of equipment or a different tactic change the outcome and make it safer, reduce liability, things like that. So we're really looking at every use of force under a microscope and trying to minimize the frequency that we use force. So after that use of force review committee does their analysis, all that statistical information gets fed into a real-time dashboard, so we have access to literally any question you could ask about location, time, date, frequency, race, injuries, whatever you want to know, we can provide you real-time information about that. So getting into last year's statistics, I'll just give it some context. As you know, our city's population is growing rapidly. Along with that, our call volume is rising drastically. So in the purple line, you can see our population showing a slow, steady incline. In the lime green color, I'm sorry, in the light blue color, you can see how drastically our calls for service increased last year. Despite that, our crime rate is on a steady decline. So to me, that says we're doing something right. So as stated, we had a little over 43,000 calls for service last year. That's everything from calls we get from dispatch to our proactive checks of businesses, parks, vacation checks. That's encompassing of every single thing we did last year. Out of that 43,000 plus calls for service, we only had 82 incidents that involved any amount of force at all. And just for your information, we report very minimal amounts of force. I should say we require our officers to report very minimal uses of force, whereas other departments, they don't require their officers to report until higher thresholds. And so we're capturing more of those incidents and more of that statistical data. Out of those 82 incidents, there were 103 people involved. So as you can imagine, sometimes we're dealing with multiple people. So we might do a felony stop on a vehicle and point our firearms at 4 people in that vehicle. And so that's how we can get more people than incidents. So on this graph, you can see our call volume steadily increasing over the last about 7 years. But despite that, our number of use of force is remaining very stable. And so you'd expect, and what you see in some other communities is that as the call volume goes up, the use of force follow that trend. But over the last decade here, we've really been emphasizing things like de-escalation, crisis intervention training, changing our tactics. And those are things that are keeping our incidents of use of force down. And like I said, every time we have an incident, we're looking at it through the lens of how can we prevent this in the future, right? The sheer fact is we can't ever reach zero. Using force is just an aspect of our job that's going to happen sometimes. Sometimes we have to use force. So it's not completely avoidable, but there's plenty of opportunity to avoid use of force in some situations. So we strive to achieve that. This graph shows that about 2/3 of our use of force is in response to a call that we're dispatched to. So it's not something that we're self-initiating, right? We're not policing aggressively with an overzealous nature that's been resulting in a lot of use of force. These are instances that we're getting called to. We're kind of just dealt the cards that were dealt, and we have to deal with it to make sure that the victims, witnesses, community members are safe. Some of the demographic data, you can see on the graph on the left that about 2/3 of the people that we use force against are not Cottage Grove residents. And so what we've learned over the last about 5 years is that about 2/3 of our crime is not committed by people who live in Cottage Grove. Our belief is that some of the people who are prone to crime view the suburbs as a soft target. They come here to commit retail theft and prey upon our community. And so naturally, they're drawn to our attention, and oftentimes they end up having force used against them. That kind of feeds into the data regarding race. And so you can see that we've got a pretty good dispersion that closely mirrors the demographic composition of our community. Not quite, but it's not a direct translation because, as I just said, the people that we're using force against aren't our community members, so we can't make that one-to-one comparison or apples-to-apples comparison, right? Because we have to take into account that these people that we're using force against are not from our community. So I don't put a whole lot of emphasis or stock on that statistic or that graph, just because I know that it's not showing that we're using force disproportionately against any one particular race. Third graph shows that what we've already known, drugs, alcohol, mental illness are a huge contributor to use of force. And so we're doing things with our community impact team to reduce that effect, right? We're out there in the community trying to mitigate the amount and problematic nature of drug and alcohol abuse, putting a lot of emphasis on mental illness, homelessness, things like that. So. All right, so now getting into some of the particulars. This is showing the prevalence of the different forms of unarmed tactics. And so starting on the left, you can see escort hold, going all the way to the right where you'd see a higher level of force, which would be striking. And so naturally, we're using those lower levels of force more often than the more harsh forms of force like striking. And that is in line with our training. We want officers to use the minimal amount of force necessary to control a situation. So I'm really happy when I see this graph that we're using those lesser forms of force more often than the higher levels of force. Same thing with our intermediate levels of force, right? This is our taser, pepper ball, 40 millimeter, OC sprays, and batons. We're using the safest levels of force more often than we're using those forms of force that are going to most likely cause injury. Don't be freaked out by the number of taser uses. As you'll see here in a moment, those are threatened or displayed use of forces. So even when an officer pulls out his taser and says, do X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to use my taser, those are reported as an actual use of force. And so out of that 25 uses of the taser, you'll see that 20 of those were actual threats. So we only used the taser 5 times last year. So pepper ball is a very successful tool that we implemented a couple years ago. You're seeing that being used more and more often with a lot of success. And the beauty of the pepper ball is that it's a very, very safe tool. And in fact, it's our only non-lethal form of force. So very safe, very effective, and you're seeing that used more and more often. Baton hasn't been used in nearly 2 decades, and so this year we implemented a change where we're actually giving our officers the opportunity to decide not to carry that anymore. So about half our officers decided to ditch that, and you'll see in a later slide what they're replacing that with. So when I talked about the pepper ball, the thing that I like about that is it gives us a lot of options, right? So of course we have the option to impact the person with that pepper projectile, but there are a lot of other options, right? I can shoot the floor, the ceiling, the wall around them and expose them to that chemical irritant. I can do warning shots. There's a lot of options besides just impacting the person. And so our officers are trained and coached to start with those safer and lower levels of force before they impact a person, unless it's absolutely necessary. And so what you're seeing on this slide is that we didn't impact anybody at all last year, right? We did area saturation, which means we shot around them. We used a lot of threats and displays of that tool. And then lastly on the right, you see the pepper ball blast. I'll save that discussion for a little bit later. That's a new tool that we just implemented. Again, 40 millimeter impact. We didn't actually deploy that at all last year. We took it out of the car, maybe threatened it or had it available to us, but we didn't impact anybody with that. Canines, we used the canine a lot as a search and tracking tool, but we did not have any apprehensions or bite last year. Of course, there are times where we take the dog out, we might make its presence known, we may threaten its use, but we didn't actually have any apprehensions last year. But you can see how often it is being used to search wooded areas, buildings, things of that nature. So very useful.
I have a question really
Yes, ma'am.
quick. Are any of these business related or workplace violence related, or are they all non-business?
All of the above.
Okay.
So the numbers that you're seeing would be representative of everything from workplace, public venues, and private residences. And if you had specific questions, I'd be happy to jot that down and I can go ahead and dig that, data mine that out. So this references our enhanced restraints. And so when somebody continues to be non-compliant, combative, resistant, do things that would cause self-injury or injury to others after they've been handcuffed, we have a number of ways that we can control them. So one of them being a spit hood, so they're not spitting at people. We can put a hobble restraint on. Now when I say hobble restraint, that conjures up an image of somebody being hogtied in a prone position. That's not what we're using that for. We restrain their feet together at the ankles, and then when we put them in a squad car, that leash is then secured in such a way that they can't kick out windows and injure themselves when they're in the back of the car. We would never ever hogtie somebody, put them in a prone position, especially for transport. So last two that reference soft restraints and sedation, those aren't functions of the police department. Those are EMS functions that the ambulance crew would do, but they are techniques or situations that the police department and the EMS department face a lot of liability, a lot of scrutiny under, so we track those and report on those as well. So soft restraints would be when you put somebody on the stretcher in the ambulance, there's soft handcuffs essentially that bind their hands to the side of the stretcher. And then as a last resort, we use chemical sedation, so they're given a medication to sedate them, put them in a comatose state, for lack of better words, so that they can't harm themselves or somebody else on the way to the hospital. So you're seeing those being used fairly frequently. Like I explained to you last year, we've had a couple individuals in our community in group home settings who are responsible for the bulk of these situations. We're starting to get a handle on that. The one primary person, juvenile, that we were having a problem with last year has since left, so we're not dealing with him. But there are a couple people that we deal with on a repeated basis that we have to use soft restraints, chemical restraints, things like that. So, but we try our very, very hardest not to use this, or to be very smart about how we use these situations. So this is talking about pursuits and use of force in and around pursuits. Last year we had 19 pursuits, which thankfully is down from the previous year. 2022, we reported 32-ish pursuits, if my memory serves me correctly. So last year we had about 19 pursuits. We only had to use stop sticks once, use the pit maneuver 3 times. And then what you're seeing here is the blocking maneuver. And so this is a new technique that we implemented last year where we're trying to mitigate the threat to the community that pursuits cause. And we're doing that by essentially sacrificing our squads. We're making intentional contact with the fleeing vehicle or a vehicle that we think might flee, blocking it in with physical contact at low speeds, causing minimal damage and preventing that vehicle from fleeing. And so we're using this in situations where we might find a stolen vehicle that's in a Walmart parking lot. Rather than waiting for that vehicle to leave, get on Highway 61 and then activate our lights, and giving the opportunity, that offender the opportunity to flee, we'll just block it in the parking lot and don't ever give them the opportunity to flee. So we're also using this at the end of pursuits. And so when they surrender, crash, get spun out in a pit maneuver, we're using this vehicle to block, using this technique to block them in so they can't resume their flight.
So quick question. I
sir.
think we were presented at one time that the police department has drones.
We do.
And that we follow, so are pursuits part of a drone follow too then, these numbers we're seeing?
No, this is nothing to do with drones, and in fact, we're not using our drones at all to track or pursue people who flee in a vehicle with our drone. We're using state patrols, planes, and helicopters for that. So if somebody's fleeing on foot, we would certainly use a drone for that, though. Our drones, we can't get them launched in time, and they simply can't fly fast enough to keep up with the fleeing vehicle. As you know, deadly force incidents are very rare, thankfully. We haven't had one since 2019. However, our officers were kind of remotely involved in an incident in Woodbury here within the last couple months. Our officers were not the actual officers who used deadly force, so therefore you're not seeing it in these statistics. But in Cottage Grove, a Cottage Grove officer has not used deadly force since 2019. And so, despite what the media and some politicians and that public narrative says, deadly force is very, very, very rare. I'm not saying that doesn't mean it's not very impactful in the community. It's not something we should try to mitigate the effects of. I'm just simply trying to educate. It's extremely, extremely rare. So as you can see on the bottom of the slide, 0.00057% of any calls for service result in any use of deadly force. Our tactics training practices result in a high level of safety. So last year we only had 5 minor injuries to the subjects, and those 5 minor injuries also include things like they weren't actually hurt, but they wanted to see a medic, or our policy requires them to be checked out by a medic, or they required some decon. So for example, when we use pepper ball, our officers are required to do some decontamination to mitigate the prolonged effects of the pepper ball, and they're required to be checked out by a paramedic. And so that's going to be represented in this 5 minor injuries, right? We didn't have any subjects that required transport or any significant medical treatment. Likewise, we didn't have any real significant injuries to our officers. We had 1 twisted ankle that resulted in a few hours lost. So a very safe year for everybody involved, which we're very proud of. So when our use of force review committee takes a look at these incidents, right, first of all, they're looking at, is this reasonable and is it within policy? 100% of those incidents were deemed reasonable and within policy. 5 of them were identified as opportunities to improve, whether it was a training issue, tactics, doing a better report, things like that. We didn't have any of those cases that were referred to command for internal affairs investigations. And once again, I'm proud to say, I think this is the third year in a row, 0 citizen complaints regarding use of force, which I don't know another agency that can report that same number. I can't tell you how monumental and important and hard to achieve that is, right? When we're using force on people in the community, it's not something that they're happy about. And so even if we do everything right, they're very, very likely to call and complain or have ideas of how we could do it better. And so for 3 years in a row to say that we haven't had any citizen complaints is a true testament to the fact that we're doing everything right and our officers are doing this in a very professional manner. So some of the themes to sum this up, force in general is very seldomly used. Deadly force is extremely rare. Most of the time we're resolving these incidents with de-escalation and CIT strategies or the mere threat or display of force being used. Our injury rates are very low, which indicate our tactics and training are very effective. And our officers are doing a great job. They're making great decisions. They're being very professional, and they're doing it in a way that represents the department very, very well. Questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question not related to use of force,
Okay.
but the call volume seems like it really went up in 2023. Any themes or is that something you guys are digging into to understand why?
Sure. There's a couple of things that contribute to that. One is our community is growing, and so naturally that's just going to generate more calls for service. Probably the most significant reason there was a huge jump is we really stressed or emphasized our officers to do a better job of documenting the work that they've been doing for years and years. And so we've gotten, over the years, they got kind of lax about logging their park checks and their business checks and their community engagement. They were doing the work, they just weren't hitting the keystrokes to give themselves and our department credit for the work they're doing. And so we really stress we want you to log this stuff. And so that represents the bulk of that jump.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Not a question, but just a comment. As a commissioner and a resident, it just puts your mind at ease that you guys are doing such a great job, and just want to applaud you and the whole team of our officers and the work they're doing. And the thing that I heard too is you're looking for improvement too. Even though you could rest on your laurels right now pretty substantially, but you're not. You're constantly looking for process improvement, and that's important. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. I'll make sure I bring that message back to the guys and gals. Anything else before we change gears a little bit and talk about training? All right. So our use of force program and therefore our use of force statistics wouldn't be so good if it wasn't for our training program. Thanks to the support of our city leaders with the Hero Center and the amount of time and money and resources that we have dedicated to training. That's the only reason that we can that I can report these numbers to you, right, is because we have the time, the money, the resources to invest in training. Right? So statistically, we know that agencies that don't invest in training pay more in lawsuits and liability and injuries in the long run. Right? If you invest on the front end on training, you can mitigate those numbers. Okay. So our goal is to exceed the Minnesota Post Board standards, promote professionalism and professional development. Make sure that our officers are very proficient in their duties, right? There's some skill sets that you don't have time to look up, right? There's some information that we don't have time to look up. Their lives on the line. When we're called upon to rescue a hostage, they need to be very, very skilled and knowledgeable about how to do that when those tactics are appropriate. And so those are perishable skills, right? So we need to practice those throughout the year, even though we don't actually do real-life hostage rescues very often. But when we're called upon, the public demands that we're good at our jobs, right? That requires training time. Also, there are those lower stress, lower priority issues that the officers need to understand too. They need to essentially know every law, every statute, every ordinance. when the public calls us there, they expect us to know all of that stuff. And that requires training for our officers to stay fresh and current on that. And our practices and laws are constantly changing year to year to year. And so again, it requires a lot of training time. So our goal is basically to provide the best service to our citizens that we possibly can. Knowing that lives are at stake, there's a lot of liability, there's a lot of safety at risk. So this past year, we really wanted to emphasize leadership development. We had a lot of turnover this last year. We had a lot of promotions, a lot of people in new roles, just a lot of growth and a lot of newness in the department this last year. And so with that, we've devoted a lot of time to everybody understanding their roles and responsibilities and developing those new leaders in their roles. We continue to emphasize risk mitigation and de-escalation. As I talked about, we implemented a lot of tactics and training surrounding vehicles. What we noticed in 2022 is that a lot of our close calls and injuries and liability was in and around vehicles, pursuits, and use of force around vehicles, things like that. And so we put a lot of emphasis this past year on making that safer and smarter. And so a lot of this is pretty redundant from the last year, so I won't focus any time on that. But as you can see from this chart, you can see that at a bare minimum, our officers are getting 92 hours of in-service training per year. And on the right, you can see how those numbers are devoted, right? It's not 92 hours of shooting and wrestling. It's everything from mental health awareness to officer wellness to first aid to anything you can think of. And so, as I said, 92 hours is the minimum. The officers have an opportunity to go to professional development and leadership trainings, external courses, and so on average, our officers are doing about 150 to 200 hours of training per year. And then if you're in specialties, of course, like an officer who's a SWAT member might be doing 500 hours of training per year. So as I said, we gave officers the opportunity to drop their baton this past year, and most of them now are carrying the pepper ball blast in its place. So this is based on the pepper ball system, but it does not shoot a spherical ball that contains a pepper powder. It just shoots a cloud of pepper powder. Right? It's got an effective range of about 10 feet. It can be used at a 1 foot standoff. It's really intended as a self-defense tool. So if somebody's attacking me, I can pull this thing out, deploy it, shoot a cloud of pava into their face and deter them. It could also be used to buy me time, space, and distance, because we know that where we don't want to be in a position where I'm close to an offender who's attacking me and I don't have time to think about my options, and I need to make a snap decision under stress. And so this gives me the opportunity to use this, create some time distance and separation, and either get away from the problem or use my tools and brain to control the problem in a smarter way. So one of the things that we have been working on recently, we worked through the budget process, is getting new tasers. So Taser informed us at the end of 24 that our current tasers will no longer be supported after 2025. And so we're working with council to hopefully secure the funding to get new tasers in 2025. I'll leave it at that. We also did get or invest in robots and drones. So again, we're trying not to put our officers in positions where they're in harm's way or we need to make decisions in close proximity with time compression. So we'll put technology in there to scout a location out or communicate with that offender or subject, and that's just safer for everybody involved. This is a pepper ball pistol. So our CSOs and reserves were formerly carrying tasers. We decided that the taser is not the best tool for them. The taser is really a control tool versus a self-defense tool. And so we decided that this pepper ball pistol would be a better self-defense tool for them. So they've been equipped and trained with this tool. We haven't had any deployments yet. I don't expect to have very many of these ever. I mean, I can't think of a single taser deployment from our reserve or CSO programs ever. So I think this will be very much the same. Probably will never have a deployment. If we do, it would be very few, but it gives them an option to defend themselves if they find themselves in that situation. So to kind of wrap up everything we've been talking about, I'd like to just bring your attention to this incident where it talks about our officers being demonstrating the best tactics, best practices, having great equipment, great training, working well as a team, and having a very good outcome. Without all the things we've been talking about tonight, this could have had a very different outcome. We were called to an address where family was calling 911 saying their family member was experiencing a mental illness or mental health crisis, and he's threatening to kill family. So our patrol officers arrived very quickly and evacuated the family members to safety. And at that point, once the family members are out and there's nobody else in harm's way, we can really slow down that incident, focus on creating time, distance, space, and negotiating with that subject and using our CIT skills. And that's exactly what we did. We made contact with the subject who was inside, tried to use our negotiation skills. We even had SWAT negotiators come, try to talk this person out of the house. Meanwhile, our officers are using things like robots, drones, shields, pepper ball, 40 millimeter, to have all those plans in place if we needed them. After a lengthy period of time, we realized that due to this individual's severe mental health crisis, we weren't going to be able to talk him out of the house, and so we implemented a tactical plan using pepper ball to coax him out of the house. And so that's what we did. We used the pepper ball. He surrendered peacefully, and then we got him into custody and got him to the hospital where he needed to be to get care. So great outcome for everybody involved. Great demonstration of all of these tools and tactics and policies that we have to have a great, safe outcome. Real quick, I'll talk about SWAT. As you know, we have a multi-jurisdictional SWAT team that comprises about 70 to 80 members throughout the county. It's a Tier 2 SWAT team, Tier 1 being the highest. So we're a Tier 2 SWAT team that's capable of everything, including hostage rescues. So the theme continues here where our call volume is increasing annually. The major reason for that is SWAT made a decision about 2 years ago to do a lot more proactive work, meaning we're getting involved in community events. So rather than responding reactively when there's a problem, we're deploying proactively to make sure or to try to prevent problems. So, for example, at Strawberry Fest, you see SWAT officers there. At Lumberjack Days in Stillwater, you're seeing SWAT there to try and deter any problems, but also we're engaging the community and learning from the community, teaching the community, recruiting. It's a great opportunity for SWAT to get out there and engage with the community. So what you're seeing there is 64 missions last year. A large number of those were those security missions or community engagement missions. So in fact, 22 of them were QRF, 24 were PR events. Very few of them were traditional SWAT missions. 5 warrant services, 1 hostage rescue, 0 barricaded individuals, and 3 mutual aid calls where we're called to Hennepin County or Dakota County to help them out. So really only less than 10 traditional SWAT missions, whereas in past years you would see in the neighborhood of 20 to 30, and that's, again, we're teaching our officers to de-escalate a lot of these situations. We're not doing those high-risk search warrants that were very typical for SWAT to do in the past. We're finding smarter ways to get those people into custody. We're giving our patrol officers the tools and training to resolve a lot of these situations safely that would otherwise have been SWAT missions in the past. So you're seeing those traditional SWAT missions decrease. We didn't do any no-knock nighttime search warrants last year. We do still reserve that ability to do those for very, very high-risk situations, but We did not have any last year, and in past years, there have been very few of those, because we're doing things like surround and callouts, where we'll show up to a search warrant, surround the house, use negotiators to call the subject out to us, rather than doing those high-risk dynamic search warrants that aren't safe or smart for anybody. So like I mentioned earlier, our SWAT officers are getting a lot of training. That's by virtue of NTOA standards. They're getting at minimally 190 hours of SWAT training per year to stay proficient in all those high-risk skills and knowledge. We did order a brand new armored vehicle, so now we're going to have 3 armored vehicles in Washington County. So as you know, Washington County poses some geographical challenges with its shape. It's very difficult to cover that county with our current 2 armored vehicles. The response times are just not satisfactory, so Sheriff's Office purchased a new Bearcat, which will be here by the end of the year, hopefully. And so we'll have 3 pieces of armor in the vehicle to respond sooner. One of the kind of unique things that we're doing is our negotiators and our tech operators are being cross-trained as tactical operators. So what we found is, as we try to use our negotiation skills in CIT, it was sucking our negotiators closer and closer to the problem, where historically they would be in a command post or a trailer or someplace off-site communicating with the subjects. In order to talk to some of these individuals, they're having to be too close to the problem, which causes some potential problems, obviously. And so we wanted to give them all the tools, training, skills to be comfortable in this situation. So we're cross-training them as if they were tactical operators, but their primary focus is still negotiations or operating drones, robots, things like that. So a lot of information. Try to summarize it as much as possible, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts or feedback, guidance.
For the robots, do they have certain kind of like, I guess, training or programming that they go through too, or how are they?
The operators?
Yeah, because you said there's drones and robots, right? So I don't really know what to picture when you say robot, so I just don't know
Sure.
how that works.
Yeah, so we have quite a number of different robots. So some being very small, from smaller than a shoebox, to some being as big as this podium, and they give us different capabilities. The small ones, basically, we can drive into a situation and just get to see what's in there, but we can't interact with the environment besides just seeing. We do have some that can do two-way communication, so we can drive that robot in there, have two-way visual and two-way communication where we can talk to a person from a safe distance. We have others that we can drive in that have manipulator arms that can grab things, lift things, carry things, do all the things that you see on the movies. So, yes, to operate any and all of those, there's different degrees of training that our operators go through. So same thing for the drones. We have drones that are meant to be outside. We have drones that are meant to be inside to fly in confined spaces. And our operators are trained to fly those as well.
So they're not like self-operated?
No.
It's always somebody doing something
Nothing
with
autonomous.
it.
They're always operated by a person.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I also had one more question too.
Yeah.
For the fireball pistol, the fireball pistol.
Pepperball.
The pepperball pistol. Look like fireball. No, how will that be placed? Like, I guess I know there's gonna be training for that, but there's also been, I thought I grabbed my taser, but I grabbed my gun, and that's kind of the same, structure. Is that something that is kind of like being focused on, or how
It
are
was.
they placed on the same side, or like
Yep.
how does that
And
work?
so for that very reason, our sworn officers, our police officers will never carry a pepperball pistol. Only our non-sworn officers, so our CSOs and our reserves, because they don't carry a pistol. So they'll be carrying that on their duty belt, on their strong side. It's very brightly marked as, it's yellow. It doesn't look like a firearm. But there will never be an opportunity for an officer to use that. We've written that into our policy that the sworn officers won't even pick up that pepperball pistol. They're prohibited by policy from using it.
I would just think that would be hard, like in such a quick decision, like how to, oh gosh, what did I grab? So
Yep, that's a real thing, and so we don't want our officers carrying both pistol and pepperball pistol.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That
Yes,
was
ma'am?
going to be that was exactly my question is, are officers still using tasers? And if no, were they going to replace them with the pepperball pistol? So the answer is no, I got that, but
Yep.
that's great news.
Yep.
And then one more quick question regarding the SWAT thing that you just went over. You said you had 64 record-breaking missions, which is fantastic, but what I didn't know is, were they real events, or were they practice events, or were they
Those are all-
partnerships with other communities?
Those are all real events. Let's see, let's go back to that slide so I can cite stats. So 24 of those were public relations events. So they invited us to come to talk to the Boy Scouts, or they wanted us to do a recruiting table at Park High School for their career day. That would be a PR event. The QRF event is more of a security mission where we're invited to be there. 3-4 operators will be there for Strawberry Fest to try and deter or respond to any problems that happen. So 46 out of those events were proactive in nature, not real incidents. 6 of those were hostage rescue or warrant service, things of that nature. So,
Excellent. Sounds like you guys had a great year last year.
yeah, those are the years we like to see, where we can get out and engage with the community
Yep.
and not respond to problems. That's a great year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, well done. Congratulations. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
No, thanks for the data and the transparency, and I really appreciate the balanced approach of safety for the community as well as for your officers, so it's really good to see.
Great,
I
thank you.
echo that. Thank you for your passion to keep our community safe. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
I actually just came up with something.
Yes, sir.
The new Bearcat, have you guys determined like pre-staging locations yet?
So that's still up to some discussion. The thought is, the brand new one will be at the sheriff's office, of course, because they're buying it. The old Bearcat, which is probably going to be refurbished, the thought is that's going to go to the Forest Lake Hugo area, and then we'll keep our MRAP for now. And so there's some discussion, and so wiggle room, how we're going to move those chess pieces around, but that's the initial thought. So.
Cool. I just wasn't sure if we needed to start having some foresight for facilities to store this thing, or.
I wish. I would love to have the Bearcat, but we'll see. We're ready to shift gears, talk about hunting maps?
We are ready to talk about, let's move right into hunting maps.
All right, so before you, you'll have a memo that has the recommendations on it. Sorry, I'm struggling to find my, I'll get there. Just grab my thumb drive, it'd be easier that way. As I'm doing this, I'll try to multitask and talk it also. So the memo recommends the changes to the archery map. Oh, that's it. Great, thank you.
My bad, I moved it.
It's all right. So this is the 24-25 hunting season's archery map, which you see displayed here. And it has the recommended changes already made to it. I also have available the 23-24 hunting map, so the previous version, if you so wish to see it and compare the changes. But essentially, the planning department has recommended a couple changes. So first, we're removing a parcel of land in the southwest portion of the city, which is adjacent to the DNR's land at about 103rd and Hadley. We're removing 2 parcels of land at 90th and Keats, and a small piece of land by Hope Glen Farms and East Point Douglas Road, another small portion by Highway 61 and Kimbrough Avenue, and 2 parcels in the north part of the city near 65th Street. And so the police department is in support of these recommendations. If you so wish to discuss them or identify these a little bit closer on the map, we can work through that. you wish to have that discussion at this time, or you want to just go ahead with that recommendation?
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
is it primarily because of development or because of
Yeah,
requests from homeowners or?
It's all development related. So some of this has been rezoned, or now it's too close to, something got developed on the adjacent parcel, so
Okay.
now it's too close, things like that nature. I should also say that there hasn't been any significant changes to our hunting ordinances. As you can see from the memo, there were no hunting-related complaints last year. We did have a couple of complaints of hearing gunshots throughout the town. We did have one complaint that an arrow ended up in my yard, but they weren't hunting-related. So 0 hunting complaints last year. So our ordinances are very effective, doing what they're supposed to do. Our hunting map is doing what it's supposed to do, so we don't see any reason at this point to make any significant changes other than those 5 minor changes that I outlined.
Can you circle the areas that you just mentioned that you're going to remove or something? It was hard for me to track
bet.
that as fast as you said it.
So first one is right down here at 103rd and Hadley, is
Okay.
this triangular pink-shaped portion.
So there's no archery currently, or is this a proposed map?
So this, both.
Oh.
So formerly, there was hunting allowed in this triangular area. So last year, you could hunt there, and we're proposing now that there should
Let
not
it
be hunting
pink.
there.
Okay, so the pink is what we're proposing. Okay,
Right.
got it.
And 90th and Keats, which would be
Right in that area?
right in
Okay.
here-ish. There was a couple spots where you could hunt.
Basically, houses are going.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, okay, but there's still 6 little yellow plots right there too? Is that okay?
Yeah, so those are,
What?
The private residences, those are the ones that are on the road, sorry.
no, you're good, Dave.
So they can hunt on their own land.
Sure.
Obviously, you can't go hunt on
Okay.
private property without permission.
I'm good with that. I was just figuring out why we moved some but not others, but they're private residents. Okay.
Hope Glen and East Point. Let's see, so right down in this area. And I apologize, I don't know the exact
That's okay.
parcel.
Just the general area is
Yeah.
good.
And 65th,
Maybe up higher.
yeah,
Yeah. Right in that
up in
area.
here somewhere.
Okay.
So-
Thank you for that. I can
Yeah, you
check
bet.
that way.
And then, so this is, what we just talked about is related to archery. We're not recommending any changes to the firearms map, so we don't see any reason to change that based on the development or future plans at this point, so.
I'm okay with moving forward with that recommendation.
Ready? Any other questions? Okay, all in favor of adopt,
I'll make a motion that we accept the hunting maps as been presented this evening.
I'll second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any questions?
Thank you for your time and
Unanimous decision,
recommendations.
so moved. All right, so we are up. Thank you for that. We are up to commission comments. Any comments, questions, concerns for the commission? Want to bring forth? Okay. That means staff reports, and I saw Gary getting pretty antsy. You want to go first this evening? Okay, great.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So the big thing, we got the thin overlay started about 2 weeks ago. We're out in Old Cottage Grove off of 77th Street, kind of by the old fire station there. A lot of pleased residents. It's pretty much finished up them 3 streets off 77th that were in pretty bad shape. We're looking this year about putting down about 2,000 tons in that process. We have 2 interns that have started ash borer treatment. They got roughly about 450 trees to treat. They do roughly about 30 a day. We got 2 sweepers out sweeping the business district. So anytime it hasn't been raining, they've been out. Mowing, we got the big tractor pricing out like rural areas, so he can only make 1 pass back. Again, that's kind of been limited with the amount of rain, but we're getting caught up on that. And then our stormwater guys they're in catch basins that actually have cement rings in them under that metal grate you see. So they're doing what's called a tuck pointing process, and that's between the rings, they tuck point mud in there, and that prevents big cave-ins that can cause the road to cave in, and up to a $5,000 process to get that thing back in, and they can get in and out in about 20 minutes per catch basin. So that's the highlights of the street department and forestry and storm. Any questions for me? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Up next, do you want to go, Ryan?
Yeah. I think I covered all the road and project updates, but there's one other public works update I would like to add. That's related to our lead service line inventory project. So a little while back, the federal EPA had revised their lead and copper rules that required every water supplier in the country to inventory every water service connected to their water system, really looking for lead service lines. Now, what's interesting in Cottage Grove is we know we do not have lead service lines, just from our experience and really how new of a city we are. But the challenge is you have to have proof of that, either through construction specifications, a city ordinance. What is it, 1981, lead was just banned, right? So after that, everything would not be lead. But there's about 1,300 homes that were built between 1958 and 1961 that were before our city ordinance went into place requiring copper services. And those three neighborhoods, south side of Highway 61, in that Thompson Grove neighborhood, and one of the Thompson Grove estates, kind of by Armstrong Elementary. We know they're copper water services. Many of our employees live there. We know what's in place, but you have to have proof. And unfortunately, the construction specs were by a different company, not the engineer Bonastro that the city signed on with in 1961. So we have to physically do survey inspections to show that. So a lot of communities did a kind of self-completed survey process. So residents in those areas received a letter a few weeks ago with just a QR code, and it's very simple. It goes right to a GIS database that we created. They just put their address and then show a picture of their service line, shows that it's copper, which we know it is, and that's completed. So about 100, 150 of those have been completed. We're sending out another letter asking for residents to do the survey with another 2-week window. But at that point, we will have to work to complete them all ourselves with our own staff. So a little bit of effort for our utility department, but it's the requirement. We're still better off. Cities like St. Paul have over 100,000 services, and they've been doing this for years to try and document those. So we'll get through it. But if you hear about this letter that folks are receiving, I know when they got it, a few folks thought is this legitimate? What is this, right? Even though we have all of our information on there, it is the city of Cottage Grove asking for this for about those 1,300 homes. So if you know someone who asked you about that, it is a survey we're looking for them to complete. So that's my only update.
Perfect, thank you.
How many did you get back?
Right now, we're at about 150. So we're hoping with our second round letter, if we can get to 300 or 400. We're trying to get as many as we can without our staff, but it will be very quick. We're actually planning to probably just start, while we do our meter appointments and things like that, we're doing them naturally to check more off, but we'll just start, either calling folks or just going door to door and seeing if they're available, because it'll take us about 2 minutes to complete it, so very quick, so.
Yeah, that QR code idea, whoever's that was fantastic. I don't know if you stole it from somebody else or who generated that, but that's a dynamite idea.
Yeah, it was actually really slick where our administration team could develop the code and our own GIS staff could create the database, and it feeds right into a database that the state is looking for, so it'll go right to them basically. So very, very quick and efficient, so.
Nice work.
And Mr. Peterson?
All right, so I gave you a copy of our Core 2 newsletter, and so feel free to review that, digest that, send any questions, concerns my way. I'll just highlight a couple of the major things. So as you know, we implemented the new strategic plans. We're making tons of progress on that. And by all metrics and measures, our officers and department are doing a great job with all of those goals and strategic plans. Really proud to say that we had 4 CPR AED saves in the last quarter. So our patrol officers saved 4 lives with the rapid response with CPR and AED in the last quarter. And excited to say that we just posted for our embedded social worker position, so that's going to be a great addition to our community impact team, and that's going to really help address some of these community issues like homelessness and chemical and alcoholism and things, mental illness, things like that. So that was kind of the missing link of our community impact team, and so getting that person on board is going to be a great asset. Along those same lines, we're really close to implementing a therapy/service canine, and so we're putting together the final pieces of that. And so a couple funding and policy and acquisition pieces, and so I'm about 90% sure that that's going to happen early in '25. So that'll be super exciting. And then obviously, this is our busy season for community engagements and special events. And so our officers have been out hitting all those smaller events, lemonade stands and playing in the park and things like that on a constant basis all day long. But we're also planning and engaged in those bigger events like Strawberry Fest and our upcoming events like Night to Unite and things like that. So super busy, engaging with the public. Some upcoming events, we've got Night to Unite on August 6th. We have a Cottage Grove open house on September 16th. And there's also a Citizens Academy that's starting in October. So if you know anybody who wants to learn more about the department, engage with the department, we're still looking for some people to fill that Citizens Academy out.
How do you sign up for the Citizens Academy?
Either follow the link from our website or any of our social media, or call one of our community impact team members, or really just talk to anybody and we'll get them hooked up. So,
Thank you.
but like I said, there's tons of really good information in this newsletter. So when you get a chance to digest that, I'm sure you'll have some questions, comments. You can feel free to direct those my way anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we will move on to council comments.
Good evening, everyone. And so one of the things I'll say is that in terms of activity, and you guys have got the presentations too, and we got both the fire and the police department strategic plans at council, and had very good discussions, and they were received very well. So it was an excellent job that was done, and so good work. Also, I guess one of the other things that we're working on budget right now a lot, so there's a lot of that activity. Also, we just appreciate kind of response back, but we just put out an offer for new communications manager and so forth. So if there's things that you think would be better on how we communicate to the public or internally, definitely now's a good time to kind of get some of those comments in, talk to your peers and your network and everything else, and just see if there's certain things that people would like to see to get better, more complete communication. Because even sometimes when we think that we're doing a good job of communication, you talk to somebody and say, oh gosh, I never heard about that, right? But so anything that we can do to improve that would be great. Let's see. Oh, the other thing, and talking about communication, I think you all should have received recently the water quality report. And, I kind of looked through it, looked pretty good and everything, but definitely if you have any feedback or comments related to that and how we might be, again, better ways to communicate things to the public and so forth, that'd be great to get feedback on. So, did I forget anything else, Ryan, that was critical? No? A couple times I've tried to go take the crisscross road, and it's just not ready yet. But, so you guys have any questions for me? All right, there you go.
I do. This
Okay.
may not be a Cottage Grove question, but the construction that's going on in 61 that they're preparing for with expect delays, what are they doing?
I should
Sorry,
take that.
thanks, Ryan.
Yep, that's a good question. So as you head north, I'm assuming you're talking about into Newport towards 44. So That's just some concrete pavement repairs. So if you remember in Cottage Grove last year, it was much more extensive, but we were down to one lane for probably a couple months. Just some smaller repairs they had to do to the concrete pavement. So it was just last weekend, then this coming weekend, assuming the weather cooperates, is when they'll be doing it. So it was down to one lane over this past weekend, you probably saw. So it is on the weekend, so that helps minimize that traffic delay. And then if everything goes well, they'll do the same next weekend and then wrap up that work, so.
That's huge. That's great.
We did reach out to MnDOT because the signs just said starts July 12th, expect delays, and that's very open-ended,
We didn't know
so.
what it was, yeah.
So it was a little work on 80th Street though, right before you got
Oh.
61. That was not part of that work, was it, or was?
That was separate, yep.
That was a separate thing, which I think caused a lot of people.
Confusion.
Pain and
Yes.
confusion. So that wasn't related to the other, because
Correct.
the other thing is being done on nights, so, yeah, and over weekend, or over
Yeah.
weekends, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, but then, correct, MnDOT did redo, that was a MnDOT job up because they own that 80th Street Bridge and then the interchanges there, which that pavement was in terrible condition, so they finally fixed that. But I know it was very painful for that day and a half during the day while they did that work. That's a little bit of a Band-Aid. The city's gonna be redoing the rest of 80th in 2026, and they're gonna fully redo those interchanges as well. But the pavement was just so poor, they had to do something, so, yep,
Thank you.
yep.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote. Meeting adjourned.